Go do it.
Go get through that.
Do that.
Go get through that. You're gonna wish y'all had got it back.
What does that mean?
For 9 seasons, Hardcore Pawn gave viewers an unfiltered look at the chaos that unfolds daily at Detroit's largest pawn shop. At the center of much of this mayhem was Seth Gold, Les Gold's only son and the shop's general manager, who often found himself on the receiving end of some of the most shocking customer attacks ever captured on reality television. From kung fu beatings to shotgun threats, from verbal assaults to near-violent altercations, Seth faced dangers that would make most people quit on day one. But what drove these customers to such extreme behavior? How did a simple negotiation turn into a life-threatening situation? Join us as we explore the most shocking times Seth Gold got attacked on Hardcore Pawn, the dangerous reality of 8 Mile. Perhaps the most infamous attack on Seth occurred in Season 2, Episode 4, titled Desperate Pawn, which aired on January 11, 2011. The episode description is chillingly blunt. Seth takes a beating when a negotiation turns into a kung fu fiasco. The incident began harmlessly enough. A customer came in wanting to pawn or sell an item, and Seth engaged in what should have been a routine negotiation. But somewhere in the discussion, things went catastrophically wrong. The customer, apparently trained in martial arts, or at least willing to throw kung fu-style kicks and punches, physically assaulted Seth during the transaction. Details about the specific nature of the beating remain somewhat vague, as reality TV editing often obscures the full severity of violent incidents to maintain broadcast standards. However, the fact that it was significant enough to be featured as the episode's main storyline suggests it was more than just a shove or a threatening gesture. According to the episode synopsis, Seth genuinely took a beating, language that implies he sustained actual physical contact and possibly injury. What made this incident particularly shocking was how quickly the situation escalated. One moment, Seth was doing his job, evaluating an item, making an offer, and trying to reach a deal that would work for both parties. The next moment, he was defending himself against a customer who had completely lost control. The episode also featured Ashley scrambling to find a customer's missing guitar, while the entire staff faced off against what was described as a mob of desperate customers during a day that brought in more business than they typically saw in 2 weeks. The kung fu attack on Seth wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a larger pattern of escalating chaos that day. For Seth, this attack must have been a wake-up call about the genuine dangers of the family business. But as viewers would learn over the next several seasons, it wouldn't be the last time a customer physically attacked him. The shotgun threat that went too far. If getting beaten by a kung fu enthusiast wasn't terrifying enough, Seth later faced an even more potentially deadly situation when an elderly grandmother threatened him with a shotgun. The incident occurred after a fur coat that had been pawned at the store was returned to the customer in damaged condition. Specifically, it had been torn. The customer, an older woman who might have seemed harmless under normal circumstances, was absolutely furious about the damaged coat. In her mind, American Jewelry and Loan had destroyed something valuable that belonged to her, and she wanted compensation or revenge or both. When Seth tried to explain what had happened or offer a resolution, the grandmother escalated the situation to a level no one could have anticipated. She threatened Seth with a shotgun. The exact details of the threat, whether she actually brandished the weapon in the store, made the threat verbally, or confronted Seth outside the shop, aren't entirely clear from available sources. What is clear is that the threat was serious enough to be featured prominently in the show, and serious enough to genuinely frighten Seth, who by this point had dealt with hundreds of angry customers. The grandmother with the shotgun became one of the most memorable antagonists in Hardcore Pawn history. But it wasn't the last. The parking lot confrontation. One of the most dangerous aspects of working at American Jewelry and Loan was that the threats didn't end when customers left the building. In one particularly harrowing incident, Seth had to intervene when a customer and employee squared off in the parking lot, threatening to turn the shop's exterior into a battlefield. The details of what sparked the parking lot confrontation aren't entirely clear, but the episode description indicates that tensions between a customer and an employee had reached a boiling point. And rather than resolve things inside the store where security could intervene, the dispute spilled outside. This created a uniquely dangerous situation. Outside, there were no security cameras covering every angle, no armed guards standing by, and no controlled environment to contain the violence. Seth physically stepped into the middle of this confrontation to try to de-escalate the situation. For someone who had already been beaten by a kung fu enthusiast and threatened with a shotgun by an angry grandmother, voluntarily inserting himself into a parking lot brawl shows either tremendous dedication to his employees or a serious lack of self-preservation instincts. Whether fully authentic or partially scripted, the parking lot confrontation demonstrated that Seth's job involved physical danger that extended beyond the shop's walls. Angry customers didn't just forget their grievances once they left the building. They waited outside, stewed in their anger, and sometimes decided to take action in the parking lot, where the encounter might go unwitnessed. But not all confrontations were physical. Some were verbal, but equally traumatic. The abuse behind the counter. While physical attacks make for dramatic television, Seth also endured countless verbal assaults that took a serious psychological toll. In his interview with The Forward, Seth acknowledged that customers would hurl all manner of insults at him and his family, including anti-Semitic slurs, during negotiations. This historical connection between Jewish business people and pawn shops stems from centuries of European history, where Jews were often restricted from other professions and pushed into money lending and pawn brokering. The stereotypes and prejudices from that era persist today, and some customers at American Jewelry and Loan apparently saw the Gold family not as individuals running a business, but as representatives of an ethnic group they blamed for their financial troubles. Every single day, they faced customers who saw them as exploiters. The verbal attacks ranged from simple profanity to deeply personal insults, targeting Seth's appearance, intelligence, business acumen, and Jewish heritage. Unlike physical attacks that happen in explosive moments and then end, verbal abuse was a constant drumbeat throughout Seth's workday. A customer unhappy with an offer might call him a cheat. Someone who couldn't afford to redeem their pawned item might blame Seth personally for their financial troubles. A negotiation that didn't go the customer's way could trigger a tirade of obscenities that would make a sailor blush. The show's TV-14 rating meant that much of this language had to be bleeped out, but viewers could see the toll it took on Seth's face. Over the seasons, you could watch his patience wear thinner, his responses become sharper, and his willingness to engage with irrational customers diminish. The verbal attacks might not leave physical scars, but they left psychological ones.
Seriously, dude, seriously. Get out.
Outside.
Right now.
Let me get my stuff, dog.
Right now.
Grab it, grab and go. Otherwise,
Yeah,
you're gonna have
you
a big
got it.
problem.
In the Season 1 episode, Turf Wars, Seth found himself in yet another dangerous situation when a man with some gear for sale turns a business deal into a brawl. The episode also featured Les dealing with a customer using a fake ID, creating a tense atmosphere throughout the shop. The gear for sale incident is particularly interesting because it illustrates how quickly routine transactions could spiral into violence. The customer came in with items he wanted to sell. Nothing unusual about that. But somewhere in the negotiation process, the interaction devolved from business into physical confrontation. Regardless of the cause, the result was the same. Seth found himself in a physical altercation with an angry customer once again. The fact that this occurred in Season 1 suggests that violent confrontations were happening from the very beginning of the show, not something that developed over time as the series sought higher ratings. A threat directed towards an individual might be shrugged off or overlooked, but what if the recipient of the physical threat turns out to be family? The PlayStation threat. While Seth was often the primary target of customer attacks, the family nature of the business meant that threats against one Gold family member affected all of them. In one memorable incident, a man tried to pawn a PlayStation 3, but when Ashley was involved in the negotiation, the customer became violent and threatening toward her. Although the threat was directed at Ashley, Seth, as both her brother and the general manager responsible for security, had to intervene to protect his sister. This put him in the difficult position of defending a family member while also trying to maintain the business relationship with a customer who might still complete a transaction if properly calmed down. The PlayStation incident also revealed the sexist dimension of many customer attacks. While Seth faced violence and threats as a regular part of his job, Ashley often faced additional hostility, simply because she was a woman in a position of authority. Customers who might have grudgingly accepted a low offer from Les or Seth would sometimes explode when Ashley delivered the same news, apparently offended that a woman dared to tell them their items weren't worth what they hoped. This meant Seth had to be constantly vigilant, not just for his own safety, but for his sister's as well. Every negotiation Ashley conducted carried the potential to escalate into a situation where Seth would need to physically intervene to protect her. It added an extra layer of stress to an already stressful job. Threat from one customer can be easily controlled, but what happens when the threat isn't just coming from one person, but from multiple sources at the same time? Facing multiple angry customers simultaneously.
As is type deal.
Right, as is.
As is a saw.
As is a saw.
Why would I want to buy one as is?
One of the most terrifying scenarios Seth faced wasn't an individual attacker, but rather what episode descriptions called a mob of desperate customers. During particularly busy days, and the show depicted several, the volume of customers would surge to overwhelming levels, and when multiple transactions went sour simultaneously, the Golds found themselves surrounded by angry people on all sides. One angry customer can usually be managed. Security can escort them out. Police can be called if necessary, and the situation can be contained. But a mob has its own psychology, where individuals who might normally restrain themselves instead feed off each other's anger and become emboldened to act in ways they wouldn't alone. Seth described days like this as bringing in more business than they typically saw in 2 weeks. While that might sound great from a profit perspective, it meant confronting proportionally more angry customers, more failed deals, and more potential for violence. And unlike his sister Ashley, who could retreat to the jewelry department, Seth's role as general manager meant he had to be on the floor, visible and vulnerable during these chaotic mob scenes. Among all the violent customers Seth and his family dealt with, few were as potentially dangerous as the MMA fighter who took a swing at Byron, the shop's head of security. While this attack was directed at security rather than Seth directly, it demonstrated the escalating level of violence the show was willing to depict. Unlike the kung fu customer who attacked Seth, who may or may not have had legitimate martial arts training, an MMA fighter would have genuine technical skills, power, and conditioning to inflict devastating damage. The fact that Byron, a large, intimidating man hired specifically because of his ability to handle violent situations, was the target of this attack shows how dangerous the American jewelry and loan environment had become. If customers were willing to attack armed, trained security personnel, no one was safe. Not Seth, not Ashley, not even Les himself. While threats from customers were already traumatic, Seth faced something even worse from the people he once called Family? How did it come to this? When Seth's biggest threat was family.
Ashley walks around this place wanting to be a manager. She's either half in or half out. She's never fully in.
I will deal with
You're just gonna give her a slap on the wrist and the same
Seth's most consistent source of conflict came from his sister, Ashley. Their sibling rivalry became one of the show's central storylines, and on multiple occasions, their arguments escalated to concerning levels. In the episode Ashley's Breakdown, Seth exploded after Ashley purchased a worthless roulette table, and what started as a standard argument turned into what the episode description called the worst fight in the family's history. While the fight was presumably verbal rather than physical, the show would certainly have promoted any actual sibling violence as a major storyline. The psychological warfare between Seth and Ashley was brutal and unrelenting. Ashley, the older sibling, had returned to the family business after leaving to raise her children. In her absence, Seth had risen to a position of significant power as general manager. Ashley's return created a power struggle that played out across multiple seasons, with Seth viewing his sister as undermining his authority, while Ashley saw Seth as an arrogant upstart who didn't respect her experience. Their arguments often played out in front of customers and staff, creating a toxic work environment and emboldening customers to act out themselves. If the owners couldn't maintain professional composure, why should the customers? The sibling warfare also meant that Seth had to constantly watch his back for internal sabotage, even as he dealt with external threats from violent customers. In one particularly dramatic episode titled I Quit, Les and Seth faced down Ashley in a final power struggle that could have changed the face of American jewelry and loan forever. The level of family dysfunction on display was shocking, and it revealed that Seth's daily stress came not just from dangerous customers, but from a deeply dysfunctional family dynamic that made work feel like warfare. After years of kung fu beatings, shotgun threats, verbal abuse, anti-Semitic attacks, MMA fighters, family warfare, and mob confrontations, what was the psychological impact on Seth? The show rarely addressed this question directly, preferring to focus on the dramatic confrontations rather than their aftermath. However, viewers could see changes in Seth over the show's 9 seasons. His patience wore thinner. His willingness to engage with difficult customers diminished. His responses became sharper, more defensive, and more confrontational. He began to exhibit signs of what psychologists might recognize as hypervigilance, a state of heightened alertness to potential threats that is common in people who work in dangerous environments. Seth also had to grapple with the question that haunts everyone in high-stress, low-reward jobs. Is this worth it? His estimated net worth is around $1 million, which is substantial but not life-changing wealth, especially when you consider the daily danger and stress he endured to earn it. Yes, the television show provided additional income and fame, but was being a reality TV star worth being physically attacked and verbally abused on a regular basis? The show never depicted Seth seeking therapy or counseling, though it's hard to imagine anyone enduring that level of daily trauma without some psychological support. The Gold family seemed to rely on each other for emotional support, but given the dysfunctional family dynamics and intense sibling rivalry, that support system was deeply flawed. Once staging concerns surfaced, fans started asking uncomfortable questions. How much of the chaos was real, and was the show ever authentic at all? The reality behind the reality. Hardcore Pawn faced more criticism than most reality shows for being scripted and fake. Critics accused the show of portraying daily activities as overly dramatic and claimed that the Gold family was guilty of poor acting and exaggerating their reactions and behavior. Many viewers became convinced that most of the altercations and confrontations were staged and inauthentic. However, Les Gold consistently denied these accusations, insisting the show was not scripted. he offered an alternative explanation. The show's popularity attracted customers who deliberately played up to gain their 15 minutes of fame by causing problems in the shop. In other words, some of the attacks and confrontations may have been real, but were motivated by customers who wanted to be on television rather than genuine grievances about pawn transactions. This creates a strange gray area where the violence was real in the sense that it actually happened and Seth actually faced these threats, but fake in the sense that the attacks were performed for the cameras by people seeking attention rather than organic confrontations between the business and desperate customers. One person who claimed to have appeared on the show confirmed this dynamic, stating that while his segment was lightly coached and unscripted, he observed at least one other guest being directed in what to say and do. This suggests a mixed approach where some customers were authentic and others were following the producer's instructions. For Seth, this ambiguity must have been maddening. Regardless of whether a customer was genuinely angry or just playing angry for television, Seth still had to respond to the threat as if it were real. A scripted punch still hurts, and the constant uncertainty about which threats were real and which were performance would create additional psychological stress. Hardcore Pawn was eventually canceled in 2014 after 9 seasons when True TV decided to change its programming direction toward comedy shows. The network felt that Hardcore Pawn didn't align with their new schedule, and no other network showed interest in picking up the series. For Seth, the end of the show meant an end to the daily grind of facing violent customers on camera. He remained at American Jewelry and Loan, alongside his father, but without cameras capturing every confrontation. Do you believe most of the confrontations on Hardcore Pawn were real or scripted for dramatic effect? Should reality shows be held accountable for putting cast members in genuinely dangerous situations, or is that just part of the entertainment business? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.